Good morning to everyone, and welcome to the ACER webinar on Europe's emerging hydrogen market. My name is Riccardo Galletta. I lead the emerging hydrogen markets team at ACER. 2 weeks ago, on Tuesday, 19th November, ACER published its first hydrogen market monitoring report. This report symbolically marks the start of a new work area for the agency. The publication in the official journal on 17 July 2024 of the Hydrogen and Decarbonized Gas Markets Regulation and Directive has formally set the regulatory framework through which hydrogen will contribute to the decarbonization of the energy sector, complementing what is already foreseen in the Renewable Energy Directive regarding the role of hydrogen in other industrial sectors, in the broader context of the climate objectives. Moreover, the Hydrogen and Decarbonized Gas Market package gives ACER extensive competencies in the field of hydrogen, broadly mirroring those already existing in electricity and gas, but considering the differences between these sectors also in terms of maturity. Monitoring the European hydrogen market is one of the new fundamental ACER competencies. With its first hydrogen market monitoring report, ACER aims to take stock of the past few years of policy and lawmaking, and the current situation of demand, supply, and infrastructure, and look ahead towards where this nascent market is likely to go. The ACER's first hydrogen monitoring report highlights that, despite ambitious EU strategies, hydrogen projects face risks from uncertainties of future hydrogen demand and high cost. You will see now the agenda on screen, and for this webinar, we foresee a presentation of the highlights of the ACER Hydrogen Market Monitoring Report, and following that, a lively panel discussion moderated by Cila Bartok, who is the head of the ACER Gas, Hydrogen and Retail Department, and hosting distinguished speakers from the European Commission and 2 industry representatives. But before going into the most interesting parts of this webinar, let me remind you a few housekeeping rules and general information. The webinar will be recorded, and the recording and the slides will be available on the ACER website from tomorrow. As you see on screen, your microphones and cameras will be disabled during the webinar. You will be able to ask questions during the webinar by accessing Slido at the link or QR code that is available in the Teams chat. Please do not use the Teams chat for questions which are about the discussion's content of the webinar. The moderator of the panel discussion will select the questions to ask in the live webinar. And if you leave your name next to your questions, in case we cannot respond to the question because of lack of time, we'll make sure to come back to you with the response to your questions in the coming days. At the end of the webinar, you will find also a feedback form in the Teams chat. Please fill it in and send it back because we care about your feedback and always try to improve. Without further ado, let me pass the floor to my colleague Vasilis Papandreou, who has led the work on this hydrogen monitoring report. Thanks for your attention, enjoy the webinar, and see you for the conclusion. Vasilis, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Good morning, dear participants in attendance. I will guide you today through the key insights of our monitoring report. And let me start by sharing some key figures of the hydro sector as it is today, and referring to our key message. Judging from the current hydrogen consumption of fossil fuel-based hydrogen, the member states' strategies, but also planned investments, and taking into considerations the high cost of renewable hydrogen compared to fossil fuel hydrogen, it is clear that the EU needs to speed up and significantly accelerate its efforts in order to succeed in reaching out the targets that are set at the EU strategy for hydrogen and the Repower Plan for 2030. Now, following the strategy and policies and the implementing acts in forms of regulation and directives, the member states have themselves set national targets that reflect their different ambitions. For example, we see that Germany is set to double its hydrogen demand, including other sectors like steel, transport, and notably power and heat. This, at the same time, creates the opportunity for other member states to become import hubs, transit zones, or export surplus hydrogen, renewable hydrogen, and low carbon hydrogen. This situation forms the need to create a hydrogen network that transports and facilitates trade of hydrogen across Europe. And for that, new market rules that are aligned with the EU framework need to be in place. However, despite the ambitions of member states, and despite the fact that the growth of installed electrolyzers on a year-on-year basis is significant, the sector starts from zero, and this means that the efforts and the investments need to speed up. We are now in a situation where there is a big pipeline of projects under consideration, but a small number of them progress in reality. The key barrier for the uptake and rapid uptake of renewable hydrogen is, of course, its high cost, which is 3 to 4 times more expensive than the conventional hydrogen based on fossil fuels like natural gas. This gap is very big, and expectations for cost reductions in the future discourage first movers in the field. At the same time, the first results of the European Hydrogen Bank's auction in 2023 showed that there are cases where very low cost production of renewable hydrogen in specific areas of Europe is possible. But most importantly, the fact that there are sectors that can and are willing to pay within the range of the production cost of renewable hydrogen. And this, of course, comes as a result of the implementing acts for hydrogen. In order to bring down costs, there needs to be a rapid scale-up of electrolyzer deployment, but at the same time, enhance the efforts to decarbonize the electricity sector, which will provide cheap renewable electricity to electrolyzers and also improve the operational conditions of electrolyzers, take into account the rules for renewable hydrogen production that are strict and actually increase the costs for renewable hydrogen, but which are also meant to ensure the low net carbon footprint of renewable hydrogen production. At the same time, low carbon hydrogen, so not renewable hydrogen, but low carbon hydrogen produced, for example, by carbon capture, seems to be much cheaper. Of course, the reality will be different on a case by case, and because of this, it is very important to clarify the role that this low carbon hydrogen will play, at least in the beginning of the ramping up of the market. Moving to the hydrogen network, there are already significant plans and projects to facilitate the transportation of hydrogen and the trading of hydrogen in Europe. But of course, any decision on costly investments comes with challenges. And here the big challenge is the future demand uncertainty, which increases financial risks for assets that are meant to recover their costs through network tariffs. The interdependency between the hydrogen sector and the electricity and gas sector also create new challenges. For example, the decisions on repurposing of gas assets to accommodate hydrogen need to be taken into account. Need to take into account intersectoral implications, for example, in security of supply. With regards to the electricity sector, things are even more complicated. Excuse me. On the first hand, we have the massive needs for grid investments, which are needed to facilitate electrolyzers and the additional renewable energy that will feed these electrolyzers, which will come on top of the already necessary investments to accommodate the electrification of the economy and the decarbonization of the electricity sector. Location of electrolyzers is also very important. For example, the delays and difficulties that grid operators face for expanding the grid may make the decision to collocate electrolyzers with demand, which is intuitive, as a difficult one and not straightforward, and actually not optimal in all cases. Furthermore, congestion issues are also critical, and here electrolyzers may either alleviate these problems if properly located, or increase the problems if, on the contrary, they are located without care. Finally, integrating electrolyzers into the electricity system, especially allowing them to provide flexibility and ancillary services, is key. And here, where the framework is not available, efforts should be also enhanced. So this complexity in network development, coupled with the uncertainty of future demand, calls into a prudent approach, in our view at least, when it comes to network developments. And this highlights the need for a transition to an integrated network planning, moving away from the fragmented and somehow not so well coordinated approach that we are following at the moment. And this also brings in the need to increase the capacity to forecast demand, but also to be flexible and ready to adapt plans according to the actual market needs. Here, member states need to and operators need to take into account the option of incremental infrastructure development when these uncertainties are high, and also be very careful on the repurposing decisions, as I said, in order to take into account cross-sectoral implications. Coping with the financial risk that this uncertainty brings is also very important, and member states need to bring in and construct mechanisms to cope with these financial risks. For example, the German mechanism to spread the costs across the time horizon and share risk among the users, operators, and the state is a good example. And especially when we are talking about cross-border hydrogen infrastructure, proper coordination between member states and regulators is also very important at this stage. Now, considering the state of affairs and also the fact that the EU needs to progress rapidly towards its decarbonization goals, the report provides a set of recommendations to speed up the uptake of hydrogen, improve network planning, and also deal with and cope with the uncertainties of the sector at the moment. So, the key recommendations are presented here. I will not go through them again because I have talked about most of these during my presentation, but I will stay into one key, if I may, message, that is now time for member states to implement the framework, to transpose the directives into the legal basis, to implement the regulations and provide a clear regulatory framework that will unleash the powers of the market, and hopefully will help to reach the targets. So with that, my presentation finishes. Thank you very much for your attention, and once again, you can pose the questions on Slido, and those that are relevant to the report, we will try to provide some written feedback during the rest of the webinar. Now I give the floor to Chila, and enjoy the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vasilis. And then I will start calling our three panelists. I will start with Karina Krassel. And Karina is a guest along with Olivia and Zsuzsanna. I would ask you to put your cameras on. Maybe that would be the easiest to get the audience know you. And so with Karina, starting with Karina, Karina works at EIT Inno Energy, a leading climate tech investor, and the European Green Hydrogen Acceleration Center is in an initiative of Inno Energy where Karina works. This initiative is a pan-European strategic value chain initiative which focuses on green hydrogen rather than the low-carbon hydrogen and looks into use cases in hard-to-abate industries. Karina works here as managing director and focuses then on green hydrogen project. Karina otherwise is a sustainable energy engineer with experience in engineering, business, and innovation. Her focus is on supporting and accelerating large-scale industrial green hydrogen projects to reduce CO2 emissions. And then she takes care of projects that are focusing on steel making, fertilizer production, synthetic fuel production, and shipping. Previously, Karina worked for Air Liquide for large industry business development. And then from her, we would hear some of these interesting hydrogen project developments and how bankability works. And then turning to Olivia. Olivia Infantes is an industrial engineer. She completed her studies in executive MBA. She has post-diploma degree as well as master in technical and economic management of the electricity sector. And Olivia is also focusing on green projects. She's responsible for hydrogen and clean energy regulation in Moeve's hydrogen business unit. And you may know that Moeve, former CEPSA, announced a positive motion strategy in 2022. And this is where Olivia is working. And the aim is to create a decarbonized solution to industry and transport, including road, aviation, and maritime sectors. And prior to this role, Olivia worked at ENGIE as head of new products and head of regulatory affairs for Red Electrica Spain. And there she focused on the integration of renewable generation. So there is a lot of perspective that could come from Olivia on renewable projects. And otherwise, CEPSA has a couple of large projects. And then there is a second generation biofuel plant that CEPSA Moeve plans to move on in Huelva. And there are two green electrolyzer plants for Huelva and Cadiz with a couple of co-developers like Fertiberia, Yara, and Enagas Renovable. So we will hear more about the learnings, about the development of this sort of novel initiative. And then the third panelist is Zsuzsanna Seles. She's working at the European Commission, Directorate General of Energy, since 2014, but during the last 3 years, she was focusing on decarbonization, development of the hydrogen package as part of a larger team, and she is now tasked with the implementation of this package, as well as she's member of the team that works on industrial carbon management. And then Zsuzsanna will tell us more how the Commission is preparing to enable hydrogen project development. And with that, then we can move to the discussions. And our discussions would focus on a series of things. But to open up to this discussion, maybe we should just mention that we have several interlinked policies in hydrogen, and then and also regulations. So that means that we will need to clearly focus on implementation and then the monitoring of the successful implementation of these regulations. There are also several support schemes that we know of, both at EU and national level. And therefore, it is very important for developers to know about them and also to combine them in order to build up successful projects. Overall, what we will see later on, there is a need for pragmatic project development. There is a lot of work to be done in terms of creating cost-reducing innovation, and then we will need to discover the user's willingness to pay to take long-term commitment in these early stages of hydrogen market development. And then together with the panel, we will discover why demand has some challenges compared maybe to supply projects, how project funding works today, and then where we would need to focus in terms of building up hydrogen demand. With that, I will start with you, Zsuzsanna. And the first question goes like this. Would you agree that demand is shy in terms of committing project, and how the Commission encourages this uptake in your view? What are some of the critical measures that you would highlight?
Good morning, everybody, also from my side. Thank you very much, Cilla, for the opportunity to be here today, and thanks for the question. Indeed, I would also say that demand is not scaling up as quickly as we would have hoped for, as we envisaged. There is the question, what can we do as policymakers? Let me mention a couple of measures in place. The most important in our view is the Renewable Energy Directive stop targets for the offtake of renewable hydrogen in the industry and transport sectors. As many of you will know, there is a sub-target for renewable hydrogen in the industry of 42% for 2030 and 60% for 2035. In the transport sector, there is 1%, but of course there are other tools for the transport sector where we support the uptake of renewable and low carbon hydrogen, the Refuel EU Aviation Obligations, the Fuel EU Maritime Initiative. Going back to the Renewable Energy Directive, and to that what the ACER colleague Vasilis already mentioned, it's now, the next step is now the member state implementation of the targets. So the work is with member states, and we are very happy at the Commission to support the member states in this implementation work. This September, we published a guidance document to support the member states to set in place the national system of obligations to fulfill the targets. Beyond the setting targets, it's also, of course, very important that we have a comprehensive system in place. So we have a definition of renewable hydrogen, which makes clear which hydrogen can count towards the target. And also a system of certification is crucial. And here, producers will be able to rely on the system, on the well-known system of the voluntary scheme, the third-party certification. And up to today, there are 6 voluntary schemes which applied to the Commission for recognition. So we are hopeful that they can start certifications quite swiftly. There are other tools we have at hand. Let me mention briefly the European Hydrogen Bank's Innovation Fund auctions, which directly supports the supply of renewable hydrogen, so the production of renewable hydrogen in the EU. But as a criteria, an eligibility criteria, it brings together producers with off-takers. So the producers have to come to this auction together with the off-taker, and this way we try to minimize the risk of off-take, the risk of not having an off-taker for the projects later on. Also very important in our view for supporting demand to see where is demand. How much is there and where is demand exactly? So we would like to create more transparency. And let me mention one tool, which was also agreed in the hydrogen and gas market decarbonization package. This is the hydrogen pilot mechanism. This will use the experience of the EU Energy Platform, which aggregated demand and supply for natural gas right after the invasion of Russia on Ukraine. So here we will use the experience and build up a platform which in a first step will bring together data on demand and supply, and this will also help us to have more clarity. This can also encourage the market by providing visibility and also help us policymakers to tailor-made our next measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zsuzsanna. I'm then turning now to Karina. And Karina, I know that you are involved in projects supporting hydrogen demand uptake. What is your perception about offtake? How offtake could be engaged? And can you offer a couple of practical examples from that experience?
Yeah, thank you very much, Cilla, for having me in this panel, and thank you for your question. So as you said, we're a climate VC, and we're involved in either investing in companies that are decarbonizing industry via hydrogen, or we're building companies ourselves. And let's say when I look at the demand side, I see what Susanna has said earlier. There is, on the one hand, let's say, already a very good strategic framing from the EU. We know where we're going. We know that the Green Deal ambitions are quite clear. Sure, there's questions around the details still, but overall the strategic framing is there, which is great. Then when you look at the demand, you have, let's say, demand incentives that are mandatory, or mandates like blending obligations for aviation, for example. There we see a really clear positioned demand incentives from the Commission that really stimulates demand in these sectors. So notably, I'm thinking about, let's say, aviation, maritime. And then we see also some, let's say, more voluntary demand commitments. And I think for me, these are particularly interesting because they push certain use cases forward, and you have front-runner companies actually willing to pay a green premium for certain industrial products using hydrogen to decarbonize. And here I can give you a few examples. Let's say we see really some clear use cases today for hydrogen that are really the front-runner use cases that will create, let's say, first industrial demand and big projects. The first one is steel. Most of you have probably heard of a company called Stegra now. They're formerly called H2 Green Steel. It's a huge, let's say, investment or decarbonization opportunity for low carbon steel in the Nordics, notably in Sweden. They've recently raised, let's say, over the last couple of years, a total of 6.5 billion to build a new steel plant producing low carbon and green steel for a demand that has already been committed, as they could have never raised the 6.5 billion euro overall. So there you see in steel, there is already a leading market. There is a demand for green steel. We just have to, let's say, foster those projects, and they've also been strongly fostered in terms of, let's say, funding. So steel is one key use case that we see. The second one that we see is fertilizer, actually, low carbon fertilizer. Here also we see, and we've worked, notably we've built a company there ourselves, which is called Fatergy, which is really aiming to produce low carbon fertilizer. And the idea was always to start with the demand in mind from the beginning. And the demand there is not directly linked to a fertilizer producer, but we went a lot further down the value chain to understand who is willing to pay a green premium here. And the answer in this case are the B2C companies that have made commitments, for example, to become net zero by 2040, 2050, 2030, depending on their ambition. And therefore see, let's say, fertilizer as part of their scope 3 emissions that they need to decarbonize. And I can give the example, for example, of Fertig, where Heineken has invested together, Heineken everybody knows, the beer producer, together with In Vivo, which is a cooperative leading, let's say, all the farmers in France. They've co-invested in a fertilizer project early on to give a demand signal to, let's say, the banks and the investors to say, we're willing to invest in such a project to get access to low carbon fertilizer. So we see, let's say, steel and fertilizer as really these key leading markets, apart from, let's say, the mandated market, which is maritime and aviation. Thank you.
Excellent news, and thanks a lot for these inputs. Now I'm turning to Olivia, and I would like to understand what is the situation at Moeve. Where is the demand, how you connect demand offtake, and which offtake sectors are important for Moeve, and why those?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Tila, ACER, for inviting us to participate in this panel. Well, as you have mentioned at the beginning, we as Moeve are developing the green hydrogen Andalusian Green Hydrogen Valley, where we are developing 2 gigas electrolysis capacity. For what? Which is our demand? Well, the thing is that we are developing the project in 2 locations where a lot of industrials are established and where there is a lot of gray hydrogen demand, meaning that the first demand that the project has is the gray demand that is moving to green hydrogen demand. Within these industrial sectors, the production of conventional fuels, fertilizers, and chemicals also. So this is the demand that really supports the project. In addition to this demand, because of our location, we are located in the Strait of Gibraltar, where 10% of total transport goods worldwide is registered. We have a huge demand or a huge interest from the maritime sector. Generally speaking, I would say that for Moeve, the key sector is transport because of two important things: the potential of decarbonization in this sector, and the second thing is that the impact on final products moves within that means of transport is really small. When you bring something from Asia by vessel, the thing is that as there's such, for example, such a big amount of shirts, TV, phones, the impact of the premium that you have to pay for that green fuel is really low on that final good. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think we can move to the second round of questions, and I would ask you a little bit about bankability. So bankability of projects now, but if we are looking a little bit forward to 2030, 2035, how do you see eventually the offtake to develop over this time frame? Are there differences in terms of what one could expect, which sectors would engage more, which ones would engage less? And is there also a concern about the cost of hydrogen and willingness to pay as we are going forward? What are your views? I will start with Karina, and then I will turn to Olivia.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So I fully concur with what Olivia said earlier. So we also see that a good way forward is to see hydrogen as a means to decarbonize and not as the goal. So that was what Olivia was referring to. So when we look at transport, we see, let's say you use green fuel to transport an end product. What does that add, let's say, in terms of green premium to the end product? The same question you can also ask yourself, for example, in steel. Let's say the green premium of green steel is around 100 to 400, maybe 500 euro a ton, depending on how cheap you can get your electricity and your electrolyzer sourcing. But when you look at a car, you need 1 ton of steel. The total premium of a car is less than 1%. So this kind of approach, we believe, makes a lot of sense when you look at demand, because that really stimulates the end product and forces the value chain to fully integrate upstream. So when you ask about, let's say, demand in 2030 and demand in 2035, I personally don't see, let's say, a full change and a switch there within the 5 years to come. There might be like a change in sectors that would become more prone to decarbonization by 2040, 45. But I think when we look at this short time frame now of 2030, 2035, we're really short in time to get to bankability. For example, we've been recently working quite a lot on the ESAF venture, where really you understand if you can get first funding today, till you close all your, let's say, engineering studies and all your, let's say, financing round, you're already hitting 2030 to start production if you're fast. So we have to really, let's say, start already today with these key sectors and key use cases that we see that make sense in the right locations in Europe, where we can get access to cheap electricity, and then work together with the off-takers very early on to give good signals to the banks and to the financiers. So we have different types of financing, be it equity or debt in the end, but to really engage all of them already early on, forcing them through the different financing schemes, reducing the risk as we go along, and firming up offtake as we can. And when you think about, let's say, bankability, the credit institutions, what they would like to see is like least risk possible for the biggest return possible. So that is clear. And there, let's say, what we understand is, let's say, they really require long-term off-taking agreements, let's say, that are, forcing an off-taker to take, let's say, 10 to 15 year price, let's say, fixations. And there, I think we can still also work with the off-takers to understand how can projects and project participants along the value chain really share risks in these projects, not pushing everything onto the off-taker, because that will be difficult to carry. And I think there also, from an institutional point of view, we can maybe help those front-runner projects to mutually share risks and to then reach bankability.
Excellent. I'm turning to you, Olivia, and then could you also reflect on the bankability issues, willingness to pay, what differences or similarities you would see for the projects that are here now or in 2030, 35, but you can also take the perspective to look at 2040, depending on what your experiences are at Moeve.
Mm-hmm. Of course, thanks. Well, the fact is that first movers we have to deal with uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty regarding technological risks. That I would say that is the main thing, and also the uncertainty on off-takers. That's why where you have a project where as Karina has mentioned, where you can put together someone that wants to really develop a project and the demand today, you need to somehow support it to be able to have a kind of example for the rest of the market to develop. And of course, I think that there is a difference between today and 2035, 2040, because in that moment, I would say that risks will be lower. That's clear for the producer and also for the off-taker, but also there will be demand, really committed demand, not only because of targets that I would say that has, of course, as Susanna has mentioned, the targets are there, but now they have to be implemented within the member states, so that the demand will be committed because of that establishment targets, but also because of the carbon of the price of the decarbonization, of the price of the CO2 itself. And from my point of view, it's very important the agreement in the last COP29 regarding the establishment of a kind of global CO2 scheme in order to be able to put a price on the CO2 that will be the real, from my point of view, the real tool to make all the demand to be committed to the projects. And as that risk and demand, risk is low and demand is committed, of course, bankability will be easier.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm moving to the last round of questions, and I would like to delve into the electrolyzer projects. We know a few have reached FID, and considering the targets and the pace we see, the EU will not meet its aspirational targets by 2030. Is this a worrying development in your view? And how do you see the progress in this area? What are the 3 key challenges in terms of project development, and then maybe how we could respond to those challenges? And I will start with Karina, I will move to Olivia, and from Zuzana, I would ask what policymakers could do in the context of this slower development. So Karina, the floor is yours. How do you see electrolyzers today?
Yeah, so for us, let's say the electrolyzers, sure, we can talk about the premium. We heard that earlier, 3 to 4 times more expensive, renewable hydrogen versus the fossil. There is challenges in scaling up the electrolyzer production, but we could also say manufacturers, European and globally manufacturers, have stepped up their game, have created capacity. Today we have more of an overcapacity in the electrolyzer space, so it's now to get projects off the ground where we can use those. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a few projects that are front-runner projects that will use, let's say, significant several hundreds of megawatts up to, I think, H2 Green Steel or Stegra, they have I think 700 or 800 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity. Those will be the front-runner projects, pushing electrolyzers, creating efficiencies, improving them, because we will actually scale the technology. So I'm sure this is, let's say, a topic to be worked on, but I'm very confident that, let's say, we can do that and we can reduce cost overall in the long term. What I see more in short term are the key challenges are really linked more to project development and to getting, let's say, these concrete projects off the ground, showing these front-runner projects in different industries. And there I see 3 main challenges. The first one is, as we iterated earlier, is to have, let's say, strong engagement from off-takers early on in these use cases that we're looking at, going, let's say, down the value chain, not stopping at hydrogen, but stopping at the end product we're trying to decarbonize. And so really integrating the value chain upstream. The second one is, let's say, trying to find mechanisms how we can share risks along partners along the value chain. So when you think about like a project that costs 1 to 2 billion euro, you need to be sure that you're not only covering the market risk via the offtake, but that you're also covering project delays, that you're covering construction overruns, that you're covering, let's say, cost overruns, that you're covering also regulatory uncertainty. So how can we find mechanisms to bring these parties, let's say, together, share risks, and bring these first of its kind projects that are like they are the first time built, more risky than others, off the ground. And I think third challenge is to create, and that has already been mentioned earlier, to be sure that we have regulatory certainty, that, let's say, several mandates which are lead markets like ACER stick, that we make sure that, let's say, we create clarity on like regulatory certainty overall, and stick to our overall strategic goals.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. I'm turning to you, Olivia, because you also have electrolyzer projects, or you are planning to do those with the Cepsa Mueve. So tell us a little bit, how do you see the situation with electrolyzers? How do you see the development to have more projects that are committed? What are the challenges? What is your experience here?
Okay, we are very close to our FID decision. So the fact is that we have worked a lot up to now. And I agree with Karina. The first thing is trying to covering all risk. And of course, regulatory risk is really important. As I have mentioned before, I'm not going to put the emphasis on that. Regarding technical or meaning manufacturers, we are working together with Siemens and Thyssen from beginning this year in order to consider all potential risks, work together in order to define all engineering topics for avoiding or minimizing the risk when the FID decision is taken. And the three main issues in which I think that we have to work on in order to really get more FID decisions, I would say, first of all, public funding covering the green premium. I'm sorry, but I have to put the emphasis on that, because covering the green premium is really important for these projects. The second thing that is mentioned in your report, in ACER report, but we have not mentioned during the panel, grid connection. I think that transport network is key in order to get all the targets of the energy transition in which we are involved. And third, we are all thinking on a CapEx, on the investment that we have to do. And of course, it is huge and we have to work on that. But we also have very important operational costs when the project is running. We have to work also on that, on trying to minimize operational costs, meaning in this case, when we talk about hydrogen production, power system costs, meaning both, of course, the PPAs, the electrons itself, but also the rest of the regulated cost that comes with the power supply. Thanks.
Excellent. So then I'm turning to you, Shoshana, and what do you say? I mean, what is your approach, or what is the angle of policymakers here, and what could be, maybe something that would support the progress in this area? What would be your thoughts that you would share with the audience?
Thank you, Cilla. So, of course, for us, it's equally important to scale up production and demand and put in place the necessary infrastructure. So we face three challenges at the same time. Now, we also see the news reports about delayed and cancelled electrolyzer projects, hydrogen projects, the lack of FIDs. To a certain extent, this can be expected in an nascent market, but of course, it's very important to follow and understand the developments and act upon it where necessary. So talking to the industry, as it was mentioned today for the two other panelists, we see that the cost of electrolyzers was increasing instead of decreasing due to inflation, due to higher raw material costs. We also see that the cost of electricity is still higher than before the crisis. There are supply chain constraints, and of course on the demand side, there is less willingness to sign offtake contracts. As you said, Olivia, you face higher investment and operational costs. We hear also the need for green markets. For example, the market for green steel is something which we hear mentioned often. What can we do as policymakers? Let me just go back to the Renewable Energy Directive sub-targets, because of course, supporting demand will also support supply. So here, the targets, the sub-targets for industry and transport translate into 3 to 6 million tons of renewable hydrogen production and consumption in the EU, and this will necessitate putting in place 30 to 60 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity by 2030. If we can reach that, this will make the EU the biggest producer and consumer of renewable hydrogen in 2030 worldwide. But of course, and also absolutely clear that the cost of electricity and therefore renewable hydrogen remains higher than the fossil alternatives. Here, I can mention the European Hydrogen Bank Innovation Fund auctions, where in the first round, which we started end of last year, we were able to grant support to 6 projects, and they will put in place 1.4, 1.5 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity over the coming years. And tomorrow we will start a second auction with 1.2 billion euros, so an increased budget, and very hopeful that this will also be supportive to the market. It's equally important for me to mention that it's not only necessary to provide the support and put in place support mechanisms and financing, but also to explain project developers what is available and how they can access it. So this was something we recognized early on in the European Hydrogen Bank communication. And now we started working with the Strategic Technologies for Europe platform to create a one-stop shop on hydrogen financing for the project developers. And we are very hopeful that this will also make it easier to access this support.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And of course, we are also looking forward to the results of the second auction rounds. We were mentioning a couple of elements about willingness to pay and how the first round was working in our report. So we are really curious how this progresses. With that, I think we finished the panel discussion, and we could look into some of the questions that we have received from the audience. And I will start with the one that challenges a bit us about, what is then going to happen later on. So it starts with, like, nowadays consumed hydrogen is produced and consumed on industrial sites, but it means that we have limited transit in terms of public networks. And the question is how this could progress, how hydrogen infrastructure could be developed, and how they could be made viable. Now, I give you a little bit of freedom, because of course your focus is more on offtakes projects, right? So we may not have in the panel the experts who are working on infrastructure projects, but a little bit it's a free-for-all question. So I would allow Karina then to make a step here, and then I would invite Olivia Zsuzsanna to say a few words about the network development challenge for hydrogen.
Yeah, so thank you for this question. So I think it's difficult today to answer how this all will play out. I think if we think about, let's say, the overall hydrogen economy, what we understand is today there's certain use cases where we already see a need for hydrogen today. And as you said rightly, they're mainly linked to industrial hubs, really decentralized projects, and in geographies where we can get access to cheap renewable power today in Europe. So this is how the story starts, I would say. And when we think about overall infrastructure, it has been mentioned several times, but I think the electricity grid infrastructure is really key here, that we build that out quickly, that we move quickly, that we accelerate permitting, etc., to really, let's say, be on time to meet our targets. And that's the first point. Then let's say we see that there is, let's say, certain industrial hubs where renewable hydrogen production today is difficult. So I'm thinking, for example, about the Ruhrgebiet in Germany or other areas in Europe where we have already industrial sites, but it's difficult to get access to sufficient and cheap, let's say, hydrogen. And there, what I see, let's say, in the longer term playing out is that we will maybe, I really put the maybe here, have, let's say, dedicated hydrogen networks that that help with imports for certain industrial sites. And so this is how maybe a practical approach to infrastructure could look like overall, is that you would have, let's say, industrial hubs linking to each other via, let's say, a hydrogen network, and then slowly increasing this as our demand for hydrogen, let's say, will grow overall, and then also as, let's say, other use cases come prevalent in the longer term. But that would be my first 2 cents.
Excellent sense. So we will pick them up, and then I'm turning to Olivia. So how do you see the infrastructure development connected to this early offtake projects? What are the needs from your perspective?
I agree with Karina. I think that it takes time. We have to put the emphasis on the development of that industrial hubs, and maybe infrastructure link to that industrial hubs, meaning if it's possible to export that production, then we have to think on terminals on ports. And as that market starts, then we will be able to really develop the mainland infrastructure. Of course, we have to start thinking on it, but in this moment, we have to put the focus on the projects developing the molecules.
Excellent. And then, Zsuzsanna, to you, because you have the policy perspective here. How do you see the network development evolving from the perspective of the Commission policies, approaches?
Thank you, Cilla. I mean, this is a very interesting and exciting topic, certainly. Let me just recall that in 2020, the Commission published the European Hydrogen Strategy. And here we've also already laid out a stepwise approach. So I agree with the 2 other speakers that this will develop over time. And in 2020, we said in 2024, we should start planning the hydrogen infrastructure. So good news, this is happening, especially at the EU level. We have the Hydrogen 10-year network development plan. So we started developing the plan. For 2030, the vision was that we will see hydrogen valleys, so hubs, and some might be connected even with cross-border infrastructure. And we already see the first steps in this direction. If we look at the northwest of Europe, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany can be connected. And then for 2050, we saw a more interconnected hydrogen infrastructure. But it's also important to underline that the hydrogen infrastructure will be not a copy of the gas infrastructure. So we will not connect every member state with every other member state. It will be a different set of producers, if we think about producing it from grid electricity, for example. So the locations will be different for production, also for end use, partly because not households will not use hydrogen as compared to natural gas. So we will see a different development. And what we did from the Commission's perspective, together with the co-legislators, the Parliament and the Member States, we put into place the planning tools, an integrated network planning for hydrogen, gas and electricity, which will allow us to connect the sectors and find cost-efficient solutions over the 3 energy carrier sectors. And also we put in place independent operators for hydrogen at national and EU level, the NOH, and they will give us the transparency. They will develop network plans for hydrogen, and we will see what is the need of the developing hydrogen system, the hydrogen market for hydrogen infrastructure. And indeed, only that should be built with what is necessary for the hydrogen market.
Excellent. Then I would ask a bit of, like the 100 million euro question, like what is the role of low carbon hydrogen? And then we have a question from the audience saying that the climate targets is about net zero and not 100% renewable. So how we would see the role of low carbon, and would the low carbon not help us to stay competitive? And I'm opening the question to all of you. Try to give a short answer here. Maybe we can deal with another question. But I think this is an interesting debate, and maybe we should not shy away to make some reflections about this question. Who would like to start?
I can start, Cilla, and then hand over, if you agree. Okay, so indeed, I mean, we have to be net zero 2050, and that means energy efficiency, energy savings first, and electrification based on renewables. So there is an emphasis on renewables. And then there are, of course, some industries which we rely on molecules, and here we have to decarbonize the molecules. And therefore, the first step was focusing on the renewable hydrogen targets to also be able to intensivize the production and consumption of renewable hydrogen and cover with initiative the price gap between fossil and renewable, of course. But we also appreciate that there is a role for a low carbon hydrogen. You see that there is a definition now for low carbon hydrogen in the legislation, and we are working on the delegated act, which will help us to put in place the methodology to calculate the greenhouse gas emission savings of low carbon hydrogen.
Okay, I see that the colleagues agree. Olivia, you want to come in, or Karina, or we can stay with this answer for now?
Stay in order to be able to answer another one.
Yes, and in order to answer maybe the other one, and then the last one, that the question that I would ask is about storage. So how do you see the role of hydrogen storage, and what kind of steps or challenges are there? Is it important, the hydrogen storage also for industrial offtakes? What kind of perspective you have about hydrogen storage? Karina or Olivia?
Maybe I can start. So
Right.
One point we see, let's say, from a practical, let's say, project development perspective is that today, let's say, it's not so easy to store, let's say, hydrogen in significant quantities. And that means it's like from overall like a risk perspective, so security perspective. The second point is, let's say, overall cost. So it's still quite expensive, let's say, to add hydrogen storage. And also overall, let's say, from a manufacturing perspective, getting access to the right, let's say, right size of the equipment, etc. So when we talk about storage more on a, let's say, ad hoc next to the plant, enabling, let's say, flexibility of the system perspective, we see that as difficult in significant quantities. You will always need, let's say, small storage. And then there is the other topic on seasonal storage overall. I think that is really an interesting one, and it could really enable the overall energy system. And there we have to see really where does it fit? Where do you have, let's say, caverns where it works, and you have to compare that also, let's say, with the overall, let's say, with an electrical solution. Sure, that at big scale is difficult at the moment as well, but we also see, let's say, the electrical, since we see in energy, we see a lot of different solutions, let's say, popping up, and we see also, let's say, from a battery perspective, interesting solutions that could, let's say, really decentralized serve the system to generate more flexibility.
Thank you. A very brief answer, Olivia, so that we can move to conclusions if you wish so.
Also important, and just mentioned that maybe infrastructure could be used as storage. In our case, we are thinking on that. That's all.
Excellent addition. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for the panel, for this very interesting discussion. And I'm passing on the floor to Riccardo Galletta, who will conclude the webinar.
Thanks a lot, Cilla, for the floor. And thanks also to Olivia, Shoshana, and Karina for the exciting discussion. So if I have to take away some points, which actually echo and complement the findings of our monitoring report, I will highlight the following. First of all, the institutional framework is complex but complete. And therefore, before entering further rule specifications, such as network codes and beyond some fine-tuning, now it is time for a speedy national implementation, which can be effective to create a European marketplace, especially if it happens in a coordinated and timely manner. And planning hydrogen infrastructure is one of these elements via an integrated and independent hydrogen operators, integrated planning and independent hydrogen operators. Second, mandated targets offer a clear push to demand that will have to compete for the most efficient supply, stable in terms of prices and reliable. This is particularly relevant for the sectors now extensively using grey hydrogen, like chemistry. But beside this, we learned from the webinar that an integrated value chain approach can help overcome some of the issues with financing, since the premium on the final product when using green hydrogen along the value chain can actually be small for certain sectors. We had the examples of the steel and the fertilizer industry. These sectors can offer a potential for a faster development of the green hydrogen industry. In all cases, we also understood that risk sharing is in the project development is key to secure bankability of the projects and therefore to develop the sector. Finally, while costs in both their variable component, meaning electricity cost, and investment component remain the biggest hurdle to speed up the green hydrogen economy and reach the green targets, other aspects such as ensuring a smooth interplay with the electricity sector and the exposure to extra-EU competition add additional challenges. Therefore, securing clear, sufficient, and efficient subsidy schemes can partly solve these challenges, but of course, this has to happen in combination with innovation and competition coming from the industry. To conclude, ACER is set to become a referential voice on hydrogen markets and regulation, and we hope that these events, next to our publication, support stakeholders to get a better understanding of where the sector stands and where it is expected to go. Before closing, I would like to thank the very competent speakers, both the ACER ones and the guests that animated the webinar, and to thank the ACER team that contributed to the preparation of the webinar and of the report. Finally, I want to thank the attendees. Today we had more than 500 attendees. So thank you for your attention and have a good day and see you at the next webinar. Bye.